All right, welcome parents and students and staff of KIS. I trust that you've had a full and rewarding and informative parent week so far. We continue this evening with our very special guest, Ms Tharoor. She will be helping us explore the compelling question of are you conscious of your unconscious bias? I will introduce Smita in a moment. Before doing this, it is my honor and my pleasure as the principal of KIS to introduce the panelists for today's session. With me today are KIS students Niharika Ghoshal, David Omar, Ananya Aruganda, and Armin Sani. So Niharika, David, Ananya, and Armin, they are founding members of the KIS Conversation on Race and Bias. That is our working title for right now. It is a group of KIS students who have come together to pursue this critically important issue and to explore the many different facets of race and bias globally, in India, at KIS. And I applaud our students for their passion, for their curiosity, for their activism. Welcome to each one of you, and thank you for joining us. I also want to thank all of the parents, the students, and the staff who have joined us today. There is a Q&A box for you to pose your questions at any time. You don't have to wait for the end. And if we see something, we'll jump right in there. Or Smita can choose to jump right in there. So please engage. Please open your minds and feel free to share any thoughts or questions that you have. Welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us. So now back to Smita. Smita Tharoor is the founder of Tharoor Associates, which is a training, coaching, and organizational development company that understands the importance of unconscious bias. Growing up in pluralistic India taught her the value of tolerance and the appreciation of accepting differences. She is passionate about understanding how our unconscious biases impact all aspects of leadership development. Her experience working in the UK, India, Europe, Asia, and the US give her a unique advantage in understanding the expectations and the needs of different cultures, which is certainly helpful for a place like KIS. Smita, we are beyond happy that you are joining us today. Welcome, at least virtually, to KIS, and I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Corey. I'm very excited, as Corey already knows, primarily because I am talking about this very important topic. It's very dear to my heart. I kind of live and breathe it, if you like. Primarily because I'm talking with students, of course, and parents, because it's Parents Week, so I know parents are here too. But the fact that students who are of any age, 15, 12, 16, 18, are beginning to even think and understand this topic is fabulous, because from my perspective, I'm hoping that at the end of this very short period of time that we're going to have an interaction, many of you, if not all of you, will go away and start thinking, gosh, that makes sense. Let me start thinking about what this means to me, because this is a topic that all of us, no matter what age we are, need to start thinking about for ourselves. It's a topic that I would say is a me, myself, and I topic. So first figure it out for me, myself, and I, and only then are we going to be able to think about how it impacts in our relationships to become leaders, to become high achievers, to do better in your academics, to whatever it might be, relationships, all of that. And that to me is the power of beginning to understand what is our unconscious bias. As Corey has already mentioned, if there are things that you feel that you want to talk about, you want to bring up, the panelists, and so Mitra, are looking at the chat box. So feel free to comment. And this for me is very much a learning experience for all of you. Anybody wants to ask questions in between, that's fine. But I'm also, I live in London, so I'm saying the wrong time in relation to your time. But in the next 45 to 50 minutes or so, I will end this particular presentation, and then it'll be entirely free for all question answers. So I'm going to give you plenty of time as well, specifically for Q&A at the end, but you're also welcome to ask in the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to kick off by just asking a very simple riddle, which is a short video. Some of you may already know it. And if you do, feel free to write the answer on the chat box.
As part of an experiment to explore the human mind, we asked 22 people to solve the same riddle and recorded their responses. Feel free to participate also. Are you ready?
The riddle. A father is about to bring his son to a job interview, applying for a position at a large stockbrokers company in the city. Just as they arrive at the company's parking lot, the son's phone rings. He looks at his father, who says, "Go ahead, answer it." The caller is the trading company CEO, who says, "Good luck, son, you've got this." The son ends the call and once again looks at his father, who is still next to him in their car. How is this possible?
As I said, if any of you want to guess, welcome to write it on the chat box, but I'm going to still play the video. Whoops.
As part of it, are you ready?
Riddle. A father is about company in the city. Company's parking lot. He'll go ahead, answer it. You've got this. The son ends the call and once again looks at his father, who is still next to him in their car. How is this possible?
He gets a call from the CEO, but it says,
"Good luck, son."
But he was next to him.
So it's not the father. I think it was probably an audio recording of his father.
Maybe he made a demo tape.
Like he has two fathers?
This is a hard one.
Maybe it's a word joke, like it's the grandfather of the son.
No, I think his name is Son.
I don't know. Maybe it's just like an old man, calling a younger guy son.
I have no idea.
The answer. It's his mother.
Oh, that's so stupid. Yes, of course.
I should have thought of that, yes.
The CEO is a woman.
so I'm biased in a sense.
Okay, I'm going to pause that. Any guesses, by the way? I'm just curious. Anyone?
We did have a guess. We did have a guess. Yeah, Anita Vinesh guessed that was his mom.
Well done. Because see, the reason it was just to grab everyone's attention right at the beginning. And the reason why I was showing you this video is this is a classic. Don't berate yourselves if you didn't guess, because most of us wouldn't have. It's a classic example of our unconscious bias. What we're doing is we're hearing something, or we're being asked a riddle, or we see something, and then literally like that, we jump to a conclusion. So then I'm saying, how is this possible? Or the questioner is asking that question, saying, it makes no sense. You just told me the father is sitting next to the son. And so this is like a new riddle that's going around. But 20 years ago, there used to be a similar riddle, which was a father and son were driving somewhere and they were in a car accident. The son required an operation. They rushed to the hospital. The surgeon looked at the son and said, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son. How is this possible?" So why am I giving you these two examples? Because what exactly, very simply put, what is unconscious bias? A lot of people, when they think of the word bias, make an assumption that it is a negative opinion or feeling or so on. But it doesn't have to be negative. It's a preference for or against a person, thing, or group. That's the word bias. And then when you put the word unconscious before it, well, you don't know that you have jumped to that conclusion. That's the point of unconscious bias. So what I'm going to try and do is help us in this very short period of time to begin to understand how do we even get unconscious biases. So the example of those two the riddles that I mentioned to you, the surgeon one and the stockbroker that I played for you to watch. Now, where does that come from? Why did we even, why is it that so many of us weren't able to guess who was the CEO? What was that about? So this picture's got nothing to do with the gender. It was the only stock picture I could get of somebody wearing a backpack. And just go with me with this analogy, because I call this my backpack theory. You can call it something else. It's the way I think about it. So just imagine that when you're born with a backpack on your back. So there it is. And you go through life, off with it on your back, with your life experiences. And as you go through life, you chuck stuff into it. So for example, you could chuck stuff like where you're born, how you're brought up, order of birth, perhaps you're the third of 3 children like I am, perhaps you're the firstborn. For those of us who are parents in this audience, we all know, for those of us who have more than one child, that we have no clue what we're doing with the first one. By the time you get around to the second or the third, you're a bit more relaxed about how you parent your children. Therefore, the child would be very different as well in how they grow up and how they see the world. It could be all kinds of different experiences. It could also be stuff that is traumatic, and I'm using the word consciously. Now, all of us have had good, bad, and ugly experiences in our life, no matter what age. So it could be that when you were 10 years old, for example, you were bullied. You were bullied at school. And I'm just making up this story. And let's imagine you were bullied by somebody in your class, and that somebody happened to come from, I don't know how many nationalities there are in this audience at the moment, so I'm going to just stick with a state in India and say from Kerala. Okay, so you were bullied badly, and that somebody comes from Kerala. Now, fast forward, and you are in year 10, year 11, year 12. New students keep coming in. You look amongst your friends, the chances are that you don't have any friends who are from Kerala. You choose not to. You just instinctively, unconsciously avoid anything to do with that entire state. Or it could be a country, it could be somebody from Japan who bullied you, it doesn't matter. But you see the point I'm trying to make. So why is it that you are having nothing to do with an entire group of people? And that is because you want to keep safe. Because you've had a bad, negative, traumatic experience once in your life. None of us want that kind of experience to happen to us again. So what do we then do? We shove it in our backpack to keep you safe. Because often a lot of people say unconscious bias, that's a bad thing. You know, that's discriminatory, you're putting people down. How can you be so racist, homophobic, whatever the phrase is that we're talking about. But it doesn't have to be, it's not that simple. It's not about headlines. It's also about keeping you safe. But then my question to you would be, by actually putting in an entire country or a state or a religion or any kind of group in there, instinctively, unconsciously, because of one experience, you then have to ask yourself, is that the right thing to do? Because there could be many, many, many people from Kerala or Japan or whatever place you want to choose in your head who are amazing and wonderful and interesting. But for some reason, because of that one experience, you have put that entire group into a box, locked the door, and thrown the key away. So that's when your instinct and your reaction and your unconscious clicking assumptive opinion that comes in doesn't work and is unfair and is self-limiting for you personally. But that's one example of what could be in our backpack. But why is it that so many of us in the audience couldn't guess that riddle? What was that about? Because that's got nothing to do with traumatic experiences. So that comes a lot from media. And I'm going to show you this ad. It's a very quick ad, so concentrate. It goes in about 30 seconds. Okay, anyone notice anything about this ad that might embed our unconscious bias? I'm happy to play it again if you want me to, because it goes by that quickly. The panelists can tell me. Do you want me to play it again, or we're okay if everybody's seen it?
I think you can play it. I mean, just chiming in maybe once more. Yeah.
Sure. It's only literally only 30 seconds. So yeah. Okay. So everyone ready? Concentrate. Okay, it's got nothing to do with the electricity of the car. Any guesses?
So Shmita, the woman is taking care of the baby there at the end. There's a woman cooking and doing the laundry, it looked like.
This ad was banned. Last year, September 2019, this ad came out in the United Kingdom and was banned. It's a banned ad. You can only find it on YouTube. You can't see it anymore. But the point I'm making is, it's still out there. It is still out there today, where without us even noticing it, we get stuff embedded into our unconscious. Let me show you something else. Now, I have a bank account in India as well, and I bank with ICICI. Now, many of you might bank with ICICI. And this was 2017-18, and it was about budget, and it had a whole bunch of words that I didn't bother to take a screen grab of. But this was the picture that was sent to me. And at that point in 2017-18, the CEO of ICICI was a woman. But there are two things going on here in this particular email that came into my inbox in 2017-18. One is the obvious one, which you've all seen. Obviously, I don't need to explain to you what the obvious one is. But there's a second, and that is the one that's even more worrying. Because why is it that the woman's color of skin is 3 shades lighter? She's white, as far as I'm concerned. She's not brown-skinned. The other 3 people are light shades of brown, but they're still brown. Whereas the homemaker has got nice pink lipstick. The other guys don't even have any mouth or a nose. It doesn't matter. Guys don't need to have faces. Not important. Girls, oh yeah, they've got to be fair and lovely. See where I'm going with this? And that was sent to all the people who have a bank account in ICICI. I can promise you, most of us wouldn't have even noticed it. Just like that ad. So what are we doing? You know, when I'm talking about this whole idea of unconscious bias, what are we actually doing about acquiring these unconscious biases? One is clearly difficult experiences that we shove into our backpack. We put it in there to keep ourselves safe. Sometimes it still needs to be there. You might decide now you have a conscious bias against X, Y, or Z, but that particular experience was so difficult, so traumatic, that's totally fine, and I'm going to keep it there. But now it's a conscious bias, and you're going to avoid a nation, a group, a religion, or whatever it might be. But very often, things go into your backpack without you even noticing it. And that's the point I'm asking you to begin to think about. And as far as I'm concerned, begin is the operative word in the sentence, because it's a journey that we will continue. I'm thinking about it all the time in my life. I mean, that's why I notice things like this. It comes and I think, huh? And it jumps up at me because I'm thinking about these things. But for most other people, it won't jump up at them. They won't even notice it. And it just gets embedded into your psyche. That's what happens. What else could be happening? It could be people of influence. And as I said right in the beginning, I know parents are in the audience, but I'm addressing most of what I'm saying to the students, because to me, that's the power. That's the new world. And the students, if they can try and get this topic and make a change, that would be amazing. So I'm asking the students, now you are in a school and you are all young, and therefore you will have people in your lives who you respect, you have high regard for. They could be teachers, they could be parents, they could be elders, they could be people of a different generation. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't stop having high regard for them, but sometimes when we are being brought up, we could be hearing things from people of influence that may show their own unconscious biases. Do you have the wisdom and the wherewithal and the self-reflection to acknowledge that and to recognize that? Because all of us who are parents in this group, very often, what we tend to do is we keep reinventing. You know, we think about how we are parented and we do the same again. I'm sure many of us parents in the audience are nodding and saying, yeah, I know, I do that. Some of us may reflect and say, actually, I didn't like that aspect of my parenting, so I'm going to do it slightly differently. But if we don't, then what happens? What happens is we are continuing to embed what we haven't even acknowledged or questioned. So this is what I'm asking you to think about in terms of what's in our backpack. There are all kinds of things that could have gone into our backpack. Certainly, I can share my own life experiences at a very simple level. For example, one of the reasons, there are many reasons why I'm so passionate about this subject, but one of the reasons why I am is because with the benefit of hindsight, and as Corey read out my little bio, when I look back at my upbringing in India, I realized, gosh, I was so lucky. So, and I tell you why I'm saying lucky and privileged. And I mean privileged and lucky in terms of, I genuinely grew up in a accepting, liberal, non-judgmental family. Now, India in the 70s, in many families, and it's not about socioeconomic, we're not talking about, upper middle class, lower middle class, it isn't about that. But many families in the same building that I lived in Calcutta would not have had the same privileges and inverted commas that I had, which are what? So I'm one of three. Firstborn as a son, and then my sister, and then I. There was never at any point in our lives any kind of gender bias towards the firstborn son. In fact, if anything, if you ask my brother, he'd probably say the girls got more attention. So nothing, no gender issues there at all. Religion. The friends that I had who came home were any religion you like, because that was the beauty of growing up in Calcutta, which is where I was. You name it, and I had friends. And nobody, my parents never said, oh, they're Muslim, oh, they're this. What's that supposed? I didn't even think about it. Then caste. I genuinely thought caste were for history books. We didn't talk about caste. My father, during the freedom fighting days, changed his surname to what it is now, which is Tharoor. And we can't tell what caste that is. I wasn't even aware in terms of caste being negative or influential amongst people of my group or my generation. Sexuality, there was somebody in our building who was gay, and we were friends with him. And there was, at no point did my parents say, oh, so-and-so is, that man is gay. Not forget to me, not to my brother. Don't go and talk to him, he's gay, he might flirt with you, nothing. So, I mean, think about that. And but the point about growing up, and I'm speaking to the students again, is when you're growing up, you take for granted your upbringing. And it's only when you leave and you're going off to university or you're, in a different space and you start reflecting, you may be able to acknowledge, wow, gosh, yes, I am lucky. That's amazing, that's fantastic. Or you might say, well, actually, there are these aspects of my, let me think about that. Let me reflect on that. Let me see what I can do to change it. So these are the things that I'm asking you to begin to think about, because there's a lot of stuff that's on in our backpacks. There's the world at large, the movies we see, the books we read, the television ads, which one of the ads that I showed you, which was banned last year, the conversations we have amongst our friends and family. So often without realizing it, we tend to follow the stereotypical conversations that other people have. Certainly in India, the ones that I work in India as well, and I have the good fortune of traveling to, until recently, traveling to India 3, 4, 5 times a year. And during lockdown, I happened to be locked down in India, and I was there for almost 5 months, from March to late July, end of July. And during that time, I was living with my brother in Delhi, and he was getting all the papers. So 5, 6 papers a day I was looking at and reading and getting the pulse of India and what's going on in India. And it doesn't matter what your nationality is, but at the moment you're living in India and you will be influenced by what's going on around you. There's so much out there that keeps reinforcing stereotypical expectations of different types of groups. One example I can certainly think of is Northeast India, Northeast Indians, people from Meghalaya, for example. who, if you have any fellow students or you know anyone from that part, don't look Indian. What is that supposed to even mean? What is an Indian supposed to look like? And there's a very excellent YouTube video that I happen to see. I think I posted on LinkedIn, but you can find it, where a woman from Meghalaya talks about the incredible racism that she experienced when she went to Delhi on work, and the expectations that people have of groups of people based on what they look like. So what we are tending to do is, without allowing ourselves to stop and think and question, we are just perpetuating and reinforcing the behavior that many other people may have done about X, Y, or Z. For example, the Meghalaya is the example that I gave you. Certainly, because of Black Lives Matter happening in the West, it's something that I want to flag up, but I'm also extremely aware that during those 5 months when I was living in India and I was reading the paper, so 5 months was March, April, May, June, July, and May is when Black Lives Matter really, May 25th was when he was killed, is when things really broke up. So May and June, if you read any Western press, it was full of that. It was hardly there in the Indian press. It was like one little tiny column, and that probably came 3 weeks later, because India had other stuff that they were dealing with. They were dealing with anti-Muslim, they were dealing with caste. They were, there were all kinds of other, racism is the phrase I'm using, but you can call it whatever you like, isms that were going on. Now, it doesn't just have to be about isms. It can be about something as simple as, I look at someone, I jump to a conclusion purely based on their looks. If I think they are beautiful, or I don't think they are beautiful based on my opinion of what beauty looks like, I am nicer to them, or I'm not so nice to them. And that's incredible, isn't it? This is our unconscious bias. Now, way back in the 70s, research was done in the United States where they took, they did this experiment, and they gave a whole bunch of boys, young boys, photographs of women. And then they said, now we'd like for you to call this woman and speak to her on the phone. It was early 70s, no mobile phones, no computers. It was another day. It was before you can even imagine. And what was interesting is the person on the phone and the photograph didn't actually match. And their photographs were either of beautiful people or not so beautiful people. Based on the looks of the photograph, the boy, when speaking to the girl, spoke in a particular way. But that isn't the point I'm just making. What's more interesting is that the girls, the way they responded, began to match. So if somebody spoke brusquely, with lack of interest and lack of engagement, a lack of excitement, the other individual speaks back in a similar way. Why am I giving you that as an example? Because with our unconscious bias and how we communicate to other people, what we may be doing without even realizing it is what I call wish-fulfilling prophecy. So there are people in your class, I don't like that person. I find them really annoying. They really irritate me. I bet you there's somebody in your class that you think of like that. And for us older people, I bet there are people in your lives who you think of like that. We all have that. But what you then do personally is when you're communicating with them, your unconscious is influencing you and how you communicate with them. And then guess what? They match you. And then guess what? You prove yourself right and say, see, that person is annoying. So you need to start breaking that cycle is what I'm saying. Listen, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, as you can probably recognize, because I want you to start thinking about it. And what I can certainly do is send, if you're all interested, the students I'm talking to, I can send Corey some links and other stuff that you can, have further exploration and read and begin to understand if this is something that genuinely interests you. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about backpacks and so on. But let me say something else as well. Oh, I have this video to show you, didn't I? Shall I just show you this video? Hold on a minute. I've got to stop share. Where's my share button gone? Where's the share button gone? It should be there somewhere, but I can't seem to see it. Okay, can't find it. I don't know why. That's weird. Sorry about this. Okay, forget about this video. This was, I can send you the YouTube video for you to see later. It was about this Dr. Dre that some of you students might know. And he was talking about colorism, specifically in relation to some ad. Now he's black, and yet what was happening was, one second, let me just go back to this and just talk very briefly about this. He's black, and what was happening was, even though he is black, he was still having unconscious biases in the way he was looking at black people. Because there are shades of black and there are shades of brown. And that's the point I was trying to make. Because it isn't that simple as Black Lives Matter, white people and black people in the Western world, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in many countries in the Western world. There is a lot of conversation going on about racism, specifically around white versus black people. And that is a given, and that has a very long history. But then there is something else, which is called colorism, which is very much about shades of the own color of our skin. So I don't know how many of you in the audience are from India, but technically we're all shades of brown. Yet, even today, in many, many countries who are not predominantly white, you will get to buy Fair and Lovely type of products. I do know that very recently, Unilever, that creates the Fair and Lovely product, and if any of you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a facial cream that has until very recently been called Fair and Lovely. So make your skin fairer and more, therefore more lovely is the point I'm trying to make. They've now finally, hallelujah, changed the name. But they're still making the product though. But the point is they're still making the product because there is still enough of a market out there for people to buy that product to lighten their skin. What is that supposed to mean? And even today in the newspapers in India, if you look in the marriage columns, you will still find ads talking about fair. In the West, when people talk about fair, they talk about color of hair, by the way, not color of skin. So if you're dark, tall, dark, and handsome, I don't know if any of you have heard that phrase, that means dark haired, not dark faced, not dark skinned. But why am I pointing this out to you? Because I know that Corey has had wonderful conversations with the students to explore areas around race, around colorism, around casteism, and so on. But what we have to acknowledge is it comes from a deeply embedded unconscious bias. It comes from generations of how people want to live or how we are seen. Therefore, it is up to us as individuals to try and begin to break that and to try and begin to question whether that is necessary or relevant anymore. And more importantly, to try and not jump to a conclusion that when you see somebody who is lighter skinned or who looks like somebody from Meghalaya or who is gay or who is black or who is Muslim or whatever the one that's shit sitting in your head at the moment, to jump to a conclusion based on just looking at somebody. That's the point I'm trying to make. But I want to explain one more aspect of our unconscious bias. And this is not a trick question. What does this picture tell you? Any guesses? No guesses? Okay. Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this one is extremely annoyed. I was assuming you might have guessed that one. She is annoyed. She's pointing a finger at you. She's scolding you. She's angry. I mean, to me, that's a given. And then if I said, what is the answer to this? Don't give me the answer, don't worry. I don't want the answer. The reason I was showing you these two pictures was because I wanted to show you this slide. Oh, his name hasn't come up. Oh, it has. Yeah, Daniel Kahneman. So this gentleman won the Nobel Prize for economy, even though he's a psychologist, because there is no category for psychology. And he wrote a book that some of you may have read already called Thinking Fast and Slow. He's also got YouTube stuff. If you Google him, you can find a lot about him. I'm just sharing one very simple aspect of something that he said that I thought is important for all of us to acknowledge and understand. Now, there's our brain, right? It's there on our heads. We can't leave it behind because today's a long day and, I don't want to use my brain today. I'm going to keep it at home to rest. It doesn't work like that. Wherever you go, you take your brain with you. What we don't recognize, some of us, is that we have a fast brain and a slow brain, and it's there. Now, the frontal new neocortex brain is your slow conscious brain. Your old reptilian brain is your fast unconscious brain. So when I asked you, what does this picture tell you? What you would have done if I'd given you the opportunity to answer is your old reptilian brain would have jumped in. And you would have been very confident in your answer that this is a woman who's very annoying and annoyed and angry and pointing fingers. And I've seen other people doing this, and that's what this is. Why? Because you've had the pattern matches. You're instinctive, you're assumptive. You jump to a conclusion like that based on your experiences. And then I said to you, what is X multiplied by Y? And you said, huh? And if I wanted the answer, you would have taken a pen and paper, you would have been rational, logical, deliberate. You would have used your new neocortex brain. Now, why am I explaining this to you? Because you have got both. I'm not saying one is bad and one is good. They're both good. The old reptilian brain is a very good brain because it keeps you safe. Don't forget that. It's there to make you have an instinct and jump to a conclusion to keep you safe. The new neocortex brain is there to help you think calmly, strategize, explore, look at the whole situation, and then make a decision. Often what we tend to do is we don't just use the reptilian to keep us safe. We just think it's nice and easy because it is. And for those of us, now I'm talking to the parents in this group, for those of us who are older, so many years of experience, we know what we're doing. We're good at what we do, we say to ourselves. Come on, I have good instinct. We've all said that. We've all said it. I have good instinct. I know I'm doing the right thing. I've got to go with my gut instinct, I say. Well, is your gut instinct right, is the question I'm asking you. Because your gut instinct is your unconscious bias. So will you pause? Will you question? Will you be rational, logical, deliberate, structured, and then make a decision about X? I'm just throwing these ideas at you. So this is just, there are about 150 types of biases, and I obviously don't have time to discuss them with you. I mentioned briefly about perception bias, where how I perceive you and how I communicate with you, you will then impact, it'll impact on you, and then you will respond in a similar way. This one is cognitive bias, which is quite interesting. It's also a kind of riddle, if you like. Let's see if anyone guesses it. Okay. Should I just pause? Can anyone guess, just for fun? What's the song? Any guesses at all?
Happy birthday to you or something? I don't know.
Well, congratulations, Corey. You're part of a 2%er. But I mean, seriously though, I mean, that's the point, you see, because when we're going, the point of that is we've got stuff in our head. And now I'm not even talking to the students. I'm talking to the grown-ups in this audience. Sorry, forgive me. I don't mean that you're not grown-up students, but I'm talking to the parents in this audience. The older we get, the more confident we are in what we say and how we think and how we communicate. And surely you kids are going to have to understand that. Surely you know what I'm talking about, right? Because it's there in our heads. And it's about how we are communicating. And we've done it for so long. You know, we're in our 40s, we're in our 50s. We know what we're doing. And so why am I saying this to you? Because cognitive bias is a really crucial one in terms of unconscious bias. And certainly for those of us who are starting out in life and going to be leaders, tomorrow's leaders, remember this one, because the more experienced you become in whatever you are doing, the more confident you are in your own abilities, the more you think that everyone knows what you're talking about. But you've got to speak in a way that other people understand what you're talking about. And it's about good and better communication. That's all I'm trying to say here. But I think it's a good one. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? Before we even talk about these, and then I want lots of questions from all of you. And I've got 2 more videos to show you as well. So just a quick, brief recap on what we've talked about so far. So what is unconscious bias? Essentially, for or against. It's not just a negative. I like you, I don't like you. I like something, I don't like something. You know, I mean, if just to very quickly make up a story on that, and I'm talking now perhaps more to the parents rather than the children, to the students. Let's imagine that when you were in school, which is now a long time ago, you had a best friend, and that best friend happens to be from Kerala. I'll use the same example. And you are obviously not from Kerala in the context of this conversation. And that best friend is still your best friend 30 years later. Chances are that because you know so much about Kerala and you have such a close friend from them, from that particular state, that when you are recruiting, when you have new experiences, when you meet strangers, if that person says they're from Kerala, your instinctive unconscious bias is, I like you. I know nothing about you, but my instinct is, my unconscious bias because of my experiences is I like you. So positive or negative, and that's something that we have to acknowledge. Where does it come from? What's in our backpack? What kind of narrative do we have? What kind of life experiences do we have? Now, each of us have different life experiences, and all of those things will be chucked into our backpack to influence us without us even realizing it. It could be genuinely difficult traumatic experiences. It could be influence from parents, from teachers, from people that you love and respect, from mentors, from role models. And you think as soon as that's what they say, that it's got to be right. And then you believe that without actually questioning it yourself. It could be from the media. It could be from the newspapers, world news. It could be from, because I was reading 6 papers when I was in India, perhaps you only read 1, but I would suggest, because everything is online these days, that you try and read variety of press. So you get different kinds of opinions rather than just reading what you believe in already, because all you're then doing is reinforcing your beliefs. But all of that stuff is there. What else can we do? We have to acknowledge that this brain of ours is there. And we have a frontal new neocortex brain, and we have a reptilian brain. Now, both brains are good, but sometimes what we don't do is allow ourselves the time to use that new neocortex brain to think and to reflect and to address the situation. So what are we going to do about it? First and foremost, as I've already said, it's not a bad thing having an unconscious bias. It's a given. So acknowledge that all of us have it. That's just who we are. We're human beings, and we will have it till the day we die, because life experiences keep changing. All we can do is think about it, acknowledge that we have it, and then reflect. So slow down, because very often we say something, and I'm saying this to the students now rather than the parents, because it's just the way people communicate in class. Certainly in this country, in England, my children were born here. They're all young adults now in their 20s, but when they went to school in this country, and I think it's still relevant, I think it's kind of reducing now, but there was a very popular phrase in class, which was considered a negative phrase, which was don't be gay, don't be so gay. And that meant you're just not good enough. Don't be so gay. Now, let's imagine, because by the time you're 10, 11 years old, you're beginning to become aware of your own sexuality. And let's imagine you're now beginning to think, actually, I am gay. Think about how that person feels. And I know that in schools in India, it won't be "don't be so gay," but it'll be something else. It might be me calling you chinky because you happen to be from Meghalaya. It might be something about darky because you're dark skinned or you come from southern India. I don't know. Things have changed from when I went to school in India, but I know it happens. Now, these are not things that you have to perpetuate. You can actually flag it up and say, hey, that's a bit rude. I don't know what the other person might be thinking. We don't know what's their narrative. So monitor your own behavior is what I'm saying. And then in terms of any kind of law, and these I'm talking to the parents now rather than the students, there are laws in India that do protect in terms of discrimination. Try and see how you are not doing that. I know, for example, until very recently, there was no law about sexuality, whereas now homosexuality is now legal. It is no longer illegal. Therefore, it is discriminatory if you show, in terms of any commentary, that you are discriminatory against gay people. The next one about widening your social circle. It's a bit difficult when we're all in Zoom land these days, but there might be a time in our lives where we can go back to meeting strangers face to face in environments that we don't know. Now, the next time you do that, actually seek out people that don't make you comfortable, because you're in a safe environment and you meet somebody for the first time and you might think, I'm not sure about that person. I don't know, I feel a little uncomfortable. But challenge that thought immediately and stick with it. Talk to them, engage, listen nicely, and so on. You know, really try and challenge yourself. The last one actually is the hardest one to do, because depending on the age we are that I'm speaking to, we may have some really difficult stuff in our backpacks that we don't even want to address. So if that is the case, then I suggest don't do it. But if you think that you have the emotional wherewithal to question, to challenge, to acknowledge, pardon me, what's in our backpack, this might be a good time to take it off, unzip it and look inside it. And then if you find that there's stuff in there which is really silly, flush it down the toilet. You don't need it anymore. That's what I'm trying to say. None of these things, by the way, are simple. These are just words out here for you to look at, and they're not simple. It's not easy for us to acknowledge that we have unconscious biases. It's a very brave thing to do. So do it at your own pace and don't berate yourselves. Okay, I love this woman. For those of you who don't know her, she's a feminist and she's a writer. Her name is CHIMAMANDA ADICHIE. She's written lots of novels. Most recently, I think, was Americana, but she also has a lot of talks. It's a 2-minute talk that kind of summarizes what I've been saying.
I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. So after I had spent some years in the US as an African, I began to understand my roommate's response to me. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unable to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind white foreigner. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. I recently spoke at a university where a student told me that it was such a shame that Nigerian men were physical abusers like the father character in my novel. I told him that I had just read a novel called American Psycho, and that it was such a shame that young Americans were serial murderers. It would never have occurred to me to think that just because I had read a novel, in which a character was a serial killer, that he was somehow representative of all Americans. And now this is not because I'm a better person than that student, but because of America's cultural and economic power, I had many stories of America. I had read Thailand, Updike, and Steinbeck, and Gateskill. I did not have a single story of America. I've always felt that it is impossible to engage properly with a place or a person without engaging with all of the stories of that place and that person. The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar. Stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of the people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity.
Isn't she amazing? That, in a nutshell, is what I've been trying to say. In fact, I've now created a podcast series on stories of unconscious bias, where I'm interviewing people around the world, many of whom I've never even met, who share their stories. Because it is about our stories and how we put people into a box, we make assumptions, and we jump to conclusions.
I would like...
Last and final, I'm going to show you a very brief, cheesy, again, it's an ad, but I like it.
As of having met her in the band, I started with friends.
He's got long hair, but at work he ties it in a ponytail. Probably piercings.
I read a lot of books. I read cognitive psychology, behavioral science. I've spoken at TED Talks. Really? Wow.
You look nerdy. Like you think you're cool, but you're still a nerd. أكثر شيء مركز عليه التراث الإماراتي واللغة العربية.
And I also think he's going to come to work.
Yeah, even I'm feeling that, yeah.
أنا وايد أحب الطبخ. دائما يعني معظم وقتي أطبخ في المطبخ. طبعا يعني أطبخ.
He's mature, like he's like cheddar cheese.
You mean basically nothing. Extreme sports athlete. I skydive and pretty high risk activity for sure.
Your actions speak louder than words, right?
God, dude, that's awesome.
I'm really surprised. It was amazing when the lights came on and you get to realize who you're actually conversing with.
استغربت أول شيء لأن أول شيء فتحت الليتات الحمراء ما راح بس أشوف واحد جالس قدامي كله خدته زاوية. This was my expectation of you. This is what you really are.
شفت شخص مثل طيب مو قاعد أتكلم. You guys should be swapped. I didn't expect that.
The rocker was someone who I wouldn't expect to be, you know, a heavy metal musician.
I should have these tattoos, not you.
James.
الشاب اللي في بالي براسي كنت راسم صورة إنه هو راح يكون عربي كثير شاب.
That's how you learn.
When I saw Garrett on the wheelchair, I was completely taken aback.
Hey man, come on.
لما جت العلبة فتحتها ما مكتوب عليه شيء. ما مكتوب عليه كوكاكولا.
And the minute I turned around, I saw that labels أو الشعار أو المغلف أو التصميم هو بس للعلب مش للناس.
ترى واضحة. يعني المفروض ما تحكم على الواحد بالشكل.
الشخص مو بلازم يعني ننتقده بشكله، لكن أول شيء نتعرف عليه عقب نقدر كيف الشخص.
It changes your mind, your perspective, your heart.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of my presentation. And I am now looking forward to having, oh, did you see that lovely quote from Daniel Kahneman? Sorry, I went too fast. I'm looking forward to having an interaction with all of you. And I hope lots of questions come flying in.
Yeah, Shmita, this is Corey, and the students have lots of questions. I just first wanted to say that was fascinating and interesting. I loved all of it. I was probably like a lot of people listening, I began to think, okay, what are my biases that I'm kind of maybe unconscious or now semi-conscious of? And so it was a good exercise, you know, to really sit there and have to really think.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'm so pleased to hear that.
And so thank you for that. It was absolutely fascinating. We're going to turn it over to our student panelists now, but I want to tell the audience as well to please use the Q&A box to ask your questions, and we will get those to Shmita. So yeah, so now we turn to our student panelists.
All right, can I go first?
Go for it.
All right, so my question is, how do we react when we ourselves are victims of bias, but we know that it was done subconsciously by someone who attacked us?
See, now this is not, most of these questions which I suspect you're going to ask are not going to have easy, simple answers, because the answer to your question is, very simply put, it's their problem, not yours. What's in their backpack, right? They've got stuff in their backpack, they've got their narrative, and therefore when they're looking at you, they say X, Y, or Z, which obviously from your perspective is hurtful, you're upset, they've been rude to you, they've said something that has upset you. But it's so easy for us to then make it all about me rather than about them. So it's not an easy answer, but if you are able to recognize and acknowledge that when somebody is being rude to me, it's not actually about me. It's about their backpack, and it's about their upbringing, and it's about their story. And that's why they're saying what they are to me. And I'm not going to try and take it personally. I'm going to try and put it aside and not allow that to change me and who I am. So be a bit selfish, in other words. Take care of yourself. Why is it that somebody out there is then going to destroy who you are as a human being? But I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but in practice, it's quite difficult. But it's something that we should try. And the more you do it, guess what? The better you get at it.
Thank you. Thank you. It really answered my question.
Hi, Ms Tharoor. This is Niharika. First of all, thank you so much for your insightful and thoughtful speech. And thank you for reinforcing this important conversation. My question to you is, how as individuals can we ensure cross-cultural sensitivity while preserving our culture and not having to conform to something explicitly?
This is actually quite interesting because I thought about this a lot, and I think it comes down to identity. And what my sons often laugh at me, but because I use this phrase so often, but being comfortable in your own skin. What does that mean? Now, as I already mentioned to you, I live in London. I have 3 sons in their 20s who are born to Indian parents. And therefore they look like you, they're brown skinned, but they are British born. What does identity then mean to us? How can we be comfortable in our own skin, be confident in who we are, and also accept the environment that we are about and who we are with? So it has to start from within us and being very confident in our own selves, whoever we are. You know, for example, one of the podcasts that I did recently, I haven't posted it yet, was a woman who said to me, she's in her early 20s, I've never met this woman, she reached out to me and she said, I'm 4'11", and there are, when I was in school, in high school, and I wanted to be the leader of the, I think, school or house or something, her teacher said to her, you can't be because you're not tall enough. You have to be tall to be the leader of your department, of your house. Now the poor thing is now, let's call her 5-6 years older than you are at the most. And she's still figuring that out and acknowledging that I need to be confident in my own identity. So it could be something as basic as just my height. So once we become more comfortable with who we are, and again, this is a work in progress because life changes. So tomorrow somebody else might say to you something that upsets you or offends you, because it's kind of connected to the question that David asked earlier. And then again, you have to acknowledge that and kind of question it and you know, accept that and so on. But the more you feel confident in your own identity, the more you are able to genuinely appreciate the different cultures and environment and people that you are meeting. And the more and the less that you will take personally what people might say to you. Now, CHIMAMANDA gave an example about, and she's clearly younger than me, when she went to America for the first time, people were saying, where did you learn to speak English? Now, I arrived in London in the 80s, and the number of people who asked me the same question. But I was lucky because I came confident in my own, comfortable in my own skin. And I know that with the benefit of hindsight. So I just thought, that's a bit odd. Why the hell? I mean, okay, you know, have you got elephants on your... No, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. So they would ask questions that were stereotypical of what India should be about. But because I was comfortable in my own skin, I can only speak for myself, I did not see that as a form of bias or racism. I just spoke. Genuinely, you're curious, let me tell you a little bit more about India. Very recently, not very recently, but I'd say about 15 years ago, which is very recently, I was in the United States, in California, and I remember you have to show your ID when you're buying wine and so on. And so I showed my driver's license, which said, you know, it's a UK driver's license. And they said, oh, you live with this lady, said, you live in the UK. Are there a lot of castles there? True story, 15 years ago. And to me, that was, she had not had enough education about what the United Kingdom is about. It wasn't about anything else other than that. So I'm sorry, it's a slightly long answer to your question, but you want to be genuinely accepting and inclusive in cross-cultural connections and influences, which I hope you do, because that's what makes the world an exciting place. You've got to first start with yourself. And then as soon as you start with yourself, only then will that follow.
Thank you so much for your response, Ms. Tharoor. It's really meaningful. Your words are really meaningful because it is true that this progressive journey begins with you yourself. And yeah, thank you so much.
I hope you don't mind if I go next, Miss. But genuinely, I think you've opened my eyes so much. I wasn't born and raised in India. I was born in the US, and just thinking back at a few experiences which I thought growing up were like, oh, that's odd. I've been born and raised in this city, yet people find it so weird. Just hearing this talk has made me realize, wow, this is unconscious bias, unconscious racism. And it's not even intentional, which blows my mind, honestly. But Miss, I kind of wanted to ask your opinion on something. So you said that a lot of unconscious bias comes from experiences and different things that we're going through. But what do you think about it kind of being enforced on us? Like, for example, a child, they are all, like, we're all very susceptible, and whatever our parents tell us, we're gonna blindly believe it, whether it's right or wrong. It's our parents. We put 100% of our trust in it, in them, sorry. So do you think that this unconscious bias can be developed more than something that's learned, let's say?
Yeah, no, exactly. And you're absolutely right, Ananya, because this whole business of parenting, and I am a parent, so I'm thinking a lot about it. You know, how do we, without meaning to, influence our children and embed unconscious biases within them? And that will happen, and that's a given. All of you young children, and I'm sorry to use the word children, because you are children of parents in this room right now, will have stuff embedded because of what your parents have said to you. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but as you get older and as you are learning to think more for yourself, you do have to start questioning whether all of that is still relevant. Now, we as parents do it for the right reasons. We're doing it because we love you, we want to keep you safe, we want to protect you, we want to do the right thing by you, based on our backpacks and our experiences and our stories. So very simply put, if I was mugged by a black man, I might say to my children, I mean, I personally wouldn't, but many parents might say, don't have anything to do with black people, purely because I had such a difficult experience. You then have to acknowledge that that's their story and not yours. Or if I go back to the history of India, And I think about people in, 10, 15-year-old, age 10 or 15 years old in 1947, who would have had extreme trauma in northern India, not southern India. And I know you're in the southern India, extreme trauma because of partition, India and Pakistan. They would have then said to their children, don't have anything to do with the Muslims or the Hindus, depending on where we're talking about. Third generation, why are we still believing that? Do you see what I'm saying? So it's sometimes we keep repeating. And so we have to acknowledge that our parents are doing the right things for us, but we also have to start learning to listen and to listen to ourselves. And if you are discussing something with your parents where you're actually thinking instinctively, I don't think I agree with you, instead of fighting back with them, because often young students do fight, children do fight with their parents. I know that, you know that, I've experienced it. Instead of fighting with them, sit with them and talk adult to adult. They'll have more respect for you. And say, I've been thinking about what you just said. I'm not sure that's right. Explore it. Challenge them. No one is too old to learn.
Thank you, Miss. That was honestly really mind-opening.
Again, thank you so much, Miss, for your insight into this whole matter. India and the world, for that matter, is riddled with issues. But while individuals acknowledge their bias and all that, what roles do governments, hierarchies, the systems that influence our backpack, what do they play? What roles do they play?
I can't answer that question because I'm not in government and I'm not able to make change or influence government or hierarchy or organizations. But what I can do is make change in one person. If one person in this entire group today genuinely gets what I'm talking about and starts thinking and reflecting, what I'm trying to say is each of us have to work for ourselves. We can't change the government. And I'm not going to go down the path of politics because it's not the right place for it today and right now. But we can't change the way any country, any government, any world is living, any area. What we can do is change the way we live within it. That's extremely hard work because you might be trying to constantly fight against what most people think is the norm. When you use the word hierarchy, for example, certainly in India, even today, most organizations have a very hierarchical system. But some organizations, because I go into India, go into organizations and work with lots of different organizations in India, some, I'm very happy to notice, have tried very hard to reduce the hierarchical system, at least in the beginning, in terms of calling your boss sir, as an example. School, it's different. You've got to have that hierarchy, in my opinion. I think it's important to have a sense of having to call your teachers by your first name. I'm not sure how that works. It doesn't kind of work in my head. But as you get older and you get into workspace, you shouldn't still continue the school thing. At that point, you should all be first name basis. Yes, perhaps you earn more money than I do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to call you ma'am or sir or any of that. And that's beginning. It's a little thing. So when you start working and you start thinking about things like that, and you become a boss, you can say, hey, listen, don't call me sir. Call me Aman. It's only a little thing, but it starts beginning to change the status quo. What Chimamanda was saying about creating stories that you expect people to behave in a certain way, well, let's try and change it. Little baby steps at a time.
Yeah, that example really helped you. Thank you.
Ms. Tharoor, there are a few questions in the Q&A box that we've gotten from the audience. And one question says, what would you say about bias being put on students because of the education we get? For example, when we study objective knowledge and history due to the resources given to us, the textbook may be written from a certain perspective, which has a certain effect on students.
Brilliant. Yes, things have to change and things are changing. I don't know what your history books are saying. My history books when I grew up in India was all about how lovely the Brits were. And it wasn't an Indian War of Independence. It was, it was a mutiny. That's what I studied in India. I know that has changed in India today. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And we do now learn in terms of Indian history, the true Indian history. Certainly in the United Kingdom, My children all studied history up to A levels, and they did not know enough about colonization. And now, finally, hallelujah, because of Black Lives Matter, schools, the students, people of your age, are contacting these schools. The people who are even my son's age, who are in their 20s, are going back to their alma maters and saying, hey, we've got to make a change. We've got to change the curriculum. So again, it's kind of connected to Aman's question, if you like, because how is it that we can change it? We can only do in our own limited fashion. You've got to read, you've got to be aware of what's out there in terms of actual facts and history. If you feel that what you are studying in school is not matching up and you can try and effect change, then you need to speak to the powers that be to say, listen, we need to change things because our history books are not saying what we need to know. I mean, I remember having a map on my son's wall, which was called Peter's, you might know this map, Corey. I think it's called Peter's map. And essentially it showed the map in terms of the genuine size of each country, of how it actually looks. I think it's Peter's map. When we look at a map of the world today, you would visualize it in your mind's eye as I'm speaking. And the United States is this size, and India is this size, and Greenland is this size, and so on. It's actually not quite like that. Africa is much bigger in real figures, in real picture. What I'm trying to say is, even a map is often changed to suit the people who have the most influence in the world. The United States, as an example. And so, whether it's history or whether it's everyone has their agenda. That's the problem, Niharika. Everybody has their agenda. And so we have to be aware that everyone has their agenda. And within that, be open, learn, question.
And you can complain to the IB, not to KIS, if you have a problem with the history books. No, I'm kidding. You can talk to me.
Smita, I've got a question. Through the course of the conversation, I think it was pretty evident that we are shaped by the conditionings that we have received. And one could get philosophical and talk about it in terms of the many lives or not, but it seems like if we are a function of the conditioning that we have received. And so what is then being original? You know, we all pride in, this is my work and this is my thought and I created this and I did this, and there's so much pride associated. And also I think, you know, there is also this pride associated with being original, but there's also, you know, motivation. People are motivated, be original. What does that mean?
It's what it says, be original, try and question. That's how I see what this person is saying, or maybe it's your question, Soumitra, is when we're saying try and be original. In other words, don't go with what everybody else is saying. Don't go with the same old stories that everything has to be done in a certain way. Use your new frontal, new neocortex brain rather than your old reptilian brain, and stop and slow down and question and address. That's what, to me, originality means, because that's what it is. You were going to say something, Corey?
No, go ahead. I was reading the questions. I have another question for you. And
Right. Okay, go ahead. What's the question?
Yeah. So just because we have you here, I think it would be really interesting. I was thinking about this, right? And my mind kind of goes in all these directions at once. Like, what is bias? When does bias either turn into something like a preference? So it's been, we've kind of processed it and we now realize, so a bias, maybe we come to terms with it. But when does it turn into a prejudice? Is there a continuum in your mind of a bias that goes to a prejudice, that goes to, discrimination? I mean, is there a continuum that you could share?
I think from my perspective, firstly, we talk about unconscious biases, right? So let's imagine we have unconscious biases. And the unconscious bias, for example, is that I don't like Muslims or I don't like gay people, but I don't know it. It's because it's embedded because of my history and how I'm growing up and my narratives. My parents told me gay people are bad or whatever it might be. And it sits there. Then one day I open the backpack, I look inside it, and I see that this is in there. Now it's a conscious bias. And yet I'm aware that it's a conscious bias, and I continue to be homophobic. I continue to be racist. I continue to be biased towards gender or colorism or whatever the thing is that was in my backpack. Then it's discriminatory. Then it is a prejudice. That's how I see it. Now, if you don't know that you are unconsciously influenced, how can I then beat you up for it? But when you do know and you've acknowledged it and you are still continuing, then come on, hang on a minute. Then there's something not right here. You've got to stop. What's going on here? Are you being racist or biased in some way? We have to question that then. And it's not a joke. It's not funny. You know, the playground conversations about saying something to somebody because of how they look or their religion or their gender is actually not funny. Those young people are feeling hurt. They are feeling upset. Teenagers and younger are going through a very vulnerable time in their lives. And at that point, being told, oh, you're so gay, as they do in this country, or you're chinky, or you're black, or you're kallo, I don't know. There's so many things that go up there as a common. Well, I'm sorry, it's actually not funny to that one person. And so we have to accept that and say, listen, let's try and think of how we're communicating. And then if you've said it because you, without meaning to, you did, think about it and then go back to them and say, you know what, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I really didn't mean to. I didn't mean to upset you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I know that that's, and some of our student panelists can talk about this, and I know there's some other Q&A questions that have come in. But I think it's something that happens at KIS that's been observed and talked about in our group and shared, is that we tend, you know, and I was a student here too, and this is true, you know, 60 years ago when I was a student here, that, you know, we tend to be so casual with each other that we don't recognize that exactly what you said, that it is damaging someone. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. So let's go on to some of the other Q&A questions.
Somebody in the Q&A box said, in order to be conscious of our bias, a certain level of maturity is required. As a parent and educator, I need instructions and question my biases. You did share a few suggestions, but they are some simple everyday exercises. Are there any that could help with my own biases?
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, it's about, very simply put, it's about reflection. And it's about, and this is, you know, it's about acknowledging that we have so much in our backpacks that have influenced us through our lives. I mean, this person is obviously a parent, not a student, the questioner. And so what does maturity mean? Maturity, from my perspective, is not just about age, it's about experiences, and it's about reflection, and it's about self-awareness. To be aware that we, us human beings, have had so many different experiences in our life that have shaped us to who we are today. So there is no simple mantra, there is no simple one tool that you can say, okay, I'm going to do this and then I no longer have unconscious bias. It doesn't work that way. It's just simply about reflection, reading more, exploring more, and amongst people who you know and trust, friends and family, who you genuinely trust, have conversations with them about this. You know, hear a video or, you know, and listen to a podcast, read a book, and then say, hey, you know, I saw this or I heard this. What did you think about it? I just found that was and then just debate. And when you start debating and you have it as a make it the new normal in part of your everyday. And once it becomes the new normal in terms of conversation, you're reflecting more. And once you reflect more, you're making more of a change within yourself.
I know we have some more Q&A.
I think I have one from an attendee, and it kind of resonates with something that I've been going through. So the question was, if you're aware of the bias being put on you at home, for example, against Muslims, and you don't support it, how do you tackle such a situation while trying to make others at home aware of their bias?
I think Ananya asked a similar question, if I'm not mistaken, kind of similar in my head anyway. I kind of connect the dots in different ways, perhaps the way you're thinking. And I really think it is about, do not fight with your parents, please, because that is not going to achieve anything. All you're going to do is push each other, and then you go that way. Instead, you need to be this way. And so it really is about genuinely trying to encourage adult conversation, adult debate between your parents and you about X, whether it's about parents don't like Muslims and they don't want to have anything to do with Muslims, and they have said that to you all the time. And that still happens today in India. So I'm glad you brought that up, the questioner. It is very, and and then I would ask the parents, what happens when your young adult child grows up and falls in love with a Muslim? Are you going to throw them out of the house? Is that how important it is to you, this anti-Muslim diatribe? Seriously. So, you've really got to start gently right now when you don't have a genuine axe to grind, because perhaps you haven't fallen in love with a Muslim. I'm going to continue with that example. Before you actually fall in love with that Muslim and have to fight with your parents because you want to have a relationship with them, now is a good time to start getting them to question it. So, seriously, mom, seriously, dad, you've kept telling me all my life that Muslims are bad and you mustn't have anything to do with Muslims. Tell me more about that. What's your story? Curious. You're asking from a point of view of curiosity. So then they'll say, well, because my mother told me, or my father. Well, what is that? Explain more. Why are Muslims bad? What is it about Muslims that you're telling me that is bad? Can we please explore a little bit more? You've got to start gently with curiosity, and this is the key, getting the parents to think for themselves. Now, just because you are the child, that doesn't mean that you don't have the power in you to make the parents think for themselves. You do. And it's up to you how you do that. I shared an example my experience. This is a long story, old story. So my eldest son, this is about a 10-year-old story or more. He was about your age, 17. And he had a really good friend, one of his best friends. And the boy's name, my son's name is Avinash, and his best friend's name is Ben. A really good friend. And Ben used to come, and I'd known him for, 3-4 years at this point. And because it was contextual, because of something that we were talking about, and I'd known Ben for easily 4 years, Avinash happened to say to me that Ben is gay. And I said, Avinash, how come you've never told me that Ben is gay before this? And I will still remember the look on his face. He raised his eyebrows and gave me the most withering look. I said, why do you need to know? That was his question to me. Now, my son is heterosexual. If he were gay, I need to know. I'd like to know who he's dating. Thank you very much. As a parent, I'm keen. I want to know. But he's heterosexual, and I know that. So why do I need to know? And I thought, wow, that's powerful. And I learned. And I'm working very hard from then on to try not to define somebody by their difference. Sometimes I still make mistakes. I'm not perfect. But do you see where I'm going with this? I learned from my son. You can teach your parents, but it's about how you teach it. Don't put people on the defensive. Nobody, including you, likes to be put on the defensive. And especially parents, because as far as they're concerned, they know more than you. So why is it that you don't like Muslims? Can you explain the story to me? Have a little chat. And keep at it, persist. It's not going to happen with one chat.
Yeah, actually, something similar I've experienced something similar, not with my family, but out in the outside world. I am a born and raised Muslim, and yet I have the name David because I was born in Canada, and it was a name that my grandfather gave me. So I like to go by the name David. So whenever people usually go into that context and they ask my real name, which is Abul Barat Omar, and they give me this weird look saying that, oh, you have such a different name compared to what you prefer. And it's gotten to a point where I am okay with, those weird judgmental looks, that it's fine. Okay, yeah, maybe, I'm unique or I'm different. Is it something wrong with me? or is it wrong that the fact that I've accepted it, that, you know, it's weird having a name David despite being a Muslim?
It's your identity, it's who you are. It's about being comfortable in your own skin. And there are many people around the world who may not have a name that supposedly matches with their religion. It isn't about that. It is who you are and how you see yourself. So, you know, when we're talking about, think about yourself as David and Goliath, David. You know, you can rule the world, be who you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, like, they've joked about it. They've joked about it a lot of times.
But no, but the point is, though, what is it that makes you feel good about yourself? It isn't about putting yourself down or seeing yourself as lesser than. It is much more about, am I comfortable in my own skin with my name as David, or do I want to be, will I be more comfortable with a clearly Muslim name because that gives me a stronger sense of identity? But then change it, because you can. You have that opportunity. Play around with it. You know, go to university. When you go to university, have a different name. If it doesn't work for you, go back to David. You figure it out. It's your story. It's your story. You play with it, and you be comfortable in yourself.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, so I had a question from my side. Where do we draw the line between the reptilian brain and the neofrontal cortex? In the sense that...
Sorry, say that again, I wasn't clear.
Sorry. How do we draw the line between the reptilian brain and the neofrontal cortex? In the sense
I really can't understand the question. Something about the clarity. Did you say West Indian?
No, he's asking where do you draw the line between the reptilian brain and the neofrontal cortex?
See, I think it's maybe because you got headphones on. I kept hearing West
I'll
Indian.
just keep it.
Maybe I'm hard of hearing. I've no clue. Probably
Am I
both.
clear now?
No, I've heard it now. So you're talking about the different. How are you going to know the difference between the reptilian and the new neocortex? Is that the question?
Or in the sense that when is it time to be certain and say, yes, this is wrong, I'm going to fight it, rather than, you know, thinking it's just another bias.
Okay, so first and foremost, try not to shout, try not to use the words like wrong, because then you're beating yourself up. Because wrong and right, black, you know, bad and good, then it just makes life much harder for yourself. Be easy on yourself. Be kind to yourself. I would say that when you need to make decisions, so depending on which university do you want to go to, what kind of applications are you going to be doing, and so on, I would hope that you don't go with your gut instinct and your reptilian brain. You would stop, you would think, you would rationalize, you would use your new neocortex brain. Another time would be when you meet somebody for the first time, you jump to a conclusion based on meeting them, that you like them or you don't like them, doesn't matter which it is. As soon as you jump to that conclusion, if you do, then say, oh yeah, so I like that person. Now, why is it that I like that person? Or I don't, whichever. And then put your neocortex brain into action, rationalize, think about it, question it, and then ask yourself why you made that decision. So slow down as much as you can.
Miss, I have a question for you. So perception of unconscious bias on the other side, from the other side, can complicate matters. And I believe that the internal locus of control can provide individuals with more self-confidence and ability to ease any such potential bias. So for example, in a way, demeanor and body language that makes me appear oblivious to such circumstances can help. So what is your opinion on such an approach in this era of globalization? Do you think such oblivious behavior that is being portrayed can actually help the situation?
Yes, the way you're saying what you are, Niharika, is that it's much more about you're trying to find tools in becoming comfortable in your own skin. And if that means that you can, in inverted commas, pretend not to care because of your body language or because of your facial expression or something, go for it, whatever works for you. Because at the end of the day, you probably still care, is what you're saying. That's what I'm reading between the lines of what you've just said. So yes, we all care because we're only human. And somebody says something to us based on something. And I mean, I just happened to pick up the Q&A that opened up and I read something about accent and dark skin. And it could even be about accents and the fact that we all have different accents. And why is it based on the accent that we have, people jump to conclusions. You know, I remember somebody here in the United Kingdom saying to me, who has a strong Nigerian accent, a bit like Chimamanda's accent, saying, I know I'll be a good leader, but the chances are I'll never get a leadership position because of my accent. So that individual, it was a man, has to work extra hard to try and challenge other people's unconscious biases to make ourselves more successful. Life's not easy. I'm sorry to say that. You know, we will have challenges all the time. And therefore, it is really up to us, whether it's accent or whether it's our color of our skin or whether it's our gender or our religion or any of that. If we acknowledge somewhere in there that it bothers us, and we think the only way that we can show them that it doesn't bother us, and that's a good thing to do, because otherwise you might be making things worse for yourself, then it is the way you're working with it, or whoever the questioner is working with it, is about saying, okay, I'm going to just be a little cool about it. I'm going to pretend that I don't care. That's fine. But what you mustn't do is not just pretend that you don't care. You've then got to work it out in your own head. Because if you do care, and that stuff is being deeply embedded in your own unconscious bias, then that's going to make it much harder for yourself.
Miss, there was another question in the chat box that I have half of an answer to, but I would also really like to hear your input on it. One of the biggest issues in India is the way people deal with transgenders. They do not accept them and they do not respect their preferred pronouns either. This breaks a person down to the point where they can't take it. Is there any way to show your support to them? And are there people for them regardless of their gender? How do we comfort them, and especially when they come out? If you don't mind, Miss, do you mind if I answer this a little bit? So I think that India does very largely stereotype transgender males or females. And coming from my city, at least in Hyderabad, I can give you a very specific incidents. I think about 2 or 3 years ago, my uncle newly opened a pharmaceutical shop, and he was doing a special puja to take away bad spirits, let's say. And with this shop, it was like a very public thing. So there was loud music, there was orange everywhere to celebrate, and a group, we could say a gang of transgender females came in and started causing a ruckus. They were demanding money, they were stripping, and they wouldn't leave until we gave them a sum, and they were disrupting the puja and creating a scene out of something that was supposed to be religious and nice. And there's also something, at least in Hyderabad, I'm not sure about other cities, but very specifically in Hyderabad, homeless people or homeless men specifically, are dressing up in saris and carrying children to seem transgender, so they're more likely to get money from others. I think it's wrong to stereotype and generalize, but I think to some extent, like you said, it's to protect themselves. And I just wanted to hear your input on this more.
My experience with transgender is different to yours. And I think the last thing that you said, Ananya, to me is very relevant. It's about stereotyping. Now, being transgender, it is a community. I mean, there's lots of books and stuff out there that you can read. Suddenly name escapes me. There's somebody who actually went and lived in the transgender community and written a book. I'll try and remember it and share it with Corey to share with all of you. In India, transgender communities, the funny thing is transgender as a gender was legalized before sexuality was legalized in India, which to me is in itself surprising, because sexuality, being gay and lesbian, was illegal. Being transgender was legal until quite recently. That was the law in India. So technically it is legal to be transgender, but the stereotypical expectations of those behaviors, often people consciously fall into what you expect them to behave like, because it makes their life easier, which is how I'm thinking, which is why I'm thinking what happened in your Hyderabad shop pharmaceutical company is for that reason, because they know that they can earn some money that way, and it's really, really difficult for them not to. Years ago, I was speaking at a conference in Bangalore, and I was asking, a bit like here, I was asking people to share their stories, stand up and share their stories. And in that audience, a transgender woman stood up and she shared a very, very powerful story. And she talked about the fact that she knew very early on as a young child that she was assigned the wrong gender at birth. She had the luck to be supported by her parents. She came out as transgender, and then she then also had the luck to be supported by an organization where she was working. Now in India, that is not common. It is still unusual. This is 6, 7, 8 years ago, this conversation, I remember. But it's about trying to acknowledge that there are many people, and I personally know someone who has said to me and shared with me in this country, who believes that they were born in the wrong gender, they were assigned the wrong gender at birth. And in my podcast, I have interviewed somebody who I've never met, who lives in New Zealand, who says to me, he's a transgender man, a young man your age, I mean, not your age, older than you, he's 21 or 22 years old. And he talks about how he was assigned the gender of a girl at birth and how he has learnt about that and acknowledged it and come out. And first he thought he was lesbian and so on. So why am I saying all of this to you? Instead of putting all transgender people in India into one big fat box about, oh, these hijras, they're going to come and bang on your car door and take money from you, try and realize that there are many of them have stories that you have no idea about. And it is about acknowledging that and within, in our own way, if we can, acknowledging that and respecting that. Again, all of these easier said than done.
Yeah. So I don't know how much time we have, Soumitra, but Smita, I think we have to end fairly soon. But I think what I'm starting to realize, what I'm starting to realize is that this is really the start of the conversation for us.
Exactly.
It is. I think that's the whole point. I think that you have raised a lot of important questions. And I think then it's really going to be our task to take this and learn more and explore this with each other through conversation and experience. And you mentioned sending us some resources.
Very happy to do that. Share it with the students.
Love to get that. Do you have anything you want to say to conclude this? There's in the Q&A. I'm really sorry we didn't really get to all the Q&A. There was one at the very end, someone wrote, I've read, all I know about this person is what I know about this person. Would you say this sums up how we should counter or avoid bias?
Yeah, it's being stereotypical, isn't it? I know everything about you. I mean, nobody can ever know everything about anybody, including people who we're closest to. We're always having different life experiences that will change us and influence us in some way. And so it is really about, as much as possible, being open, being curious. And as students, I'm certain that all of you are very curious. I hope so, because it's a boring old world if you're not curious. Be genuinely curious and excited about what's out there. So that's what I'm saying. It's really about be curious, be excited, and try and be comfortable in your own skin. Because begin with, it's me, myself, and I said that right in the beginning. Be selfish, be kind to yourself. Don't berate yourselves, because you are the future. And what we want is whichever country you're going to grow up in and become adults and work and have families of your own and all the rest of it, we want you to be trying to acknowledge this whole business about being comfortable in our own skin and therefore being better human beings in how we have any kind of interaction with whoever. Even though it's idealistic, it can be done. So that's my kind of last points to the students.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think it was an absolutely great experience for us. And we just want to thank you and acknowledge your willingness to be here for us today. So thank you.
Not at all. I really enjoyed it. I think your students are great. I mean, I only met 4 of you face to face, but I'm sure there are many others listening in and thinking and sending in questions. So all the very best and great to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Smita. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the session. And we have another one coming up at 6:30 about university admissions if you'd like to tune in. Thank you so much, Smita. I really wish we could meet you in person, and hopefully the next time you're in Kodi.
I love to. I haven't come to Kodi since I was about 14.
Okay.
So one day,
we would
I
love
won't
to
come
have
to
you.
coding without meeting you. So there you go.
Thank you. Thanks for that. All right. See you all. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thanks, guys.